Eli, can you please tell us when did you start creating content on LinkedIn in the first place? And when did you start creating content on LinkedIn as a founder?
Well, I've been a founder for the past 20 years. So I guess any content I've created on LinkedIn has always been as a founder. Um, but I'd say that about 3 years ago, I started thinking about posting seriously on LinkedIn and went through these kinds of fits and starts of maybe 1 month of really dedicated, and then I'd fall off the bandwagon. And then 3 months later, I'd be like, oh shit, I remember this is super important. I need to invest in it. And I'd do 2 weeks and then I'd fall off the bandwagon. It was just on and off like that for a couple of years. And then it wasn't until really about 6 months ago that I started taking it very seriously, posting every single day, creating video content every single day. And it's been a big difference since making that shift.
And you raise an interesting point because I've talked to a few founders and they say, well, we create content for 1, 2, or 3 months and then we kind of like fall off. They say it most, in my experience, mostly comes down to lack of strategy behind the posting. Why are we doing it? What is the end goal? Was it similar for you, or do you think there was another reason why this was happening?
Yeah, it was very similar. So I think for me, I knew who I should be speaking to audience wise. So, my two agencies, NoBoringDesign, design agency, and MatterMade marketing agency, we sell to the same persona, which is like a corporate marketer, mid-market type of
Yeah.
type of folks. And so I knew I needed to be creating content for that persona. But at the end of the day, I'm not a corporate marketer. I never have been. And I candidly don't really care that much about marketing.
Yeah.
And so every time I would try to create content for that persona, it just felt disingenuous. It was wildly uninteresting to me.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't force myself to do it. It didn't sound like my voice, and there was no passion or interest behind it.
Interesting. I had a call with a founder a couple of months ago, and he said, I want to do two things similar to you, one separate agency for one service, another one for another service, but similar target persona. He asked me, okay, what should the fact is I create content for a month or two, then I lose interest. Then he said, what should I be creating content about? I asked him, which one are you more passionate about? Is it the first one or the second one, right? There's two services. So in your experience, I want to ask you, Eli, was it much easier to create content once you knew that the stuff that you're talking about now is something that you're actually deeply passionate about?
So much easier.
Mm.
It wasn't until I let go of control a little bit, and stopped trying to force it. So I'd been trying to force it with this marketing persona and was getting frustrated because I didn't like it, as I mentioned, and just decided that I should instead write about the things that I'm personally passionate about. I'm personally passionate about agencies, about agency profitability, agency
Mm.
finances. I feel like most agency owners out there operate their businesses in a way that is not as profitable as they could be. And I know that I actually surveyed 70 agency owners, and
Mm.
92% of them said that they believe that their agencies could be more profitable. And almost half of them were unhappy with their current profit margins. So
Mm.
it's just like this problem space that I've lived myself. I personally understand deeply. And it happens to be one of my strengths is like building very profitable agencies. And so I like sharing my learnings and my kind of strategies and tactics with the world. Um, but yeah, it wasn't until coming around to that and starting to post, I think about 3 months into posting that type of content,
Mhm.
all of a sudden things started clicking. I started getting consistent followers every week. I started getting DMs from people, from agency owners, comments from agency owners, people who I never met before. And so that was like an aha moment for me where it was like, okay, I can keep doing this and it's going to start compounding. People are starting to know me for this. And then I just, of course, ran into the problem of, well, I don't have anything to sell these people. So that's why I'm starting a new company that's specifically for agency owners.
Nice, interesting. And well, you said that you started getting some signals like around the 3 month mark. A lot of people that I talk to, or founders specifically, they usually lose interest till that point because there's a notion of, especially marketing founders, if they're related to the marketing industry, they treat organic social like paid social. Put in X, get Y return, right? So how do you get out of that sort of a mindset? Because I'm sure you must have had that in your head. Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. Could you give us a bit of context?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it has to come down to discipline. Um,
Mm.
I think you're an unserious founder if you're not willing to put in a year's worth of work to make a channel work. And I was an unserious founder about this particular category for the first 3 years, as I mentioned. And then suddenly I was like, this is no longer a nice to have. This is a must have. And if it takes me a year of grinding and getting no signal back, then so be it. I'm going to do it because I want to know for a fact that I've really tried fully and I know what that output is. And, I think even though I said in the last 3 months, it's given me that traction, it's been, at least 6 months of effort daily to even get to that point. Right. So, I think founders who are flippant about this channel are just going to get beat by all of their competitors. So by all means, founders who are listening, who are thinking about giving up, please do, so that I can eat your lunch and steal all of your business.
Love that. I recently made a post about this. A lot of people are going to sleep on this founder branding thing and they're going to push it back, right? They're going to say, well, let's wait till Q1 ends and then we can think about this. Let's wait till Q2 maybe. The thing is, if you start today, as you mentioned, Eli, you need at least 3 months of proper discipline and momentum to then see some sort of ROI coming back to you, right? And then after the 3-month mark, you see some signals and then you double down on it. And that pretty much is it. Now, when you started creating content seriously, let's say, when you were something passionate about, that kind of content, did you have a strategy or were you just creating content like off the cuff? You just created something that you thought of in the moment and you just created off the back of it? Or did you have like a formal strategy behind it?
Definitely a formal strategy evolved. Like once we landed on speaking about agency topics and agency finance and agency profitability, then I essentially established with my team, and I should say, I'm not doing this by myself. I have a team. So I have a full-time video editor. I have someone who helps me write the content, because what I realized was that my zone of genius is like, I have a bunch of stories to tell and I have a bunch of strategies and tactics that have worked for me. If I sit in front of a blank page and try to write posts, I'll spend all day. I'll spend all day and I'll hate myself through the process. And then my imposter syndrome will kick in and it's just like a whole mess. So I was like, okay, let me think about this more of like an assembly line. I'm the boss, I'm the foreman, and I have all this like stuff that just needs to be taken out of me. And so I hired someone who's really, really good at asking me questions to extract stories out of me, organizing my thoughts, using my tone of voice, and coming up with drafts that I can then tweak and make my own. And then we use the video footage from those sessions to post alongside the written content. And so I think finding a system that works for you is critical, and it doesn't mean you have to do it all alone. Like people like I was trying to do it all alone, and that's why I kept failing. That plus the audience mismatch. But yeah, back to your question, once we landed on the agency ICP, then we broke it up into, okay, like what's this look like if we phase it out over the next 2 quarters? What are our themes? What are our content pillars? Then we started testing, different pieces of content to see what are hot buttons for people. What do people engage with? Either it makes them angry and fires them up, or it gets them really engaged and really curious.
So the first 3 months, you could say, was more about experimentation. And then after a 3-month mark, you get enough signals to see what's working with your audience, what isn't, and then if there's room for experimentation, right?
I mean, my guess is it's probably more like 6 months of experimentation. We definitely had enough data at the 3-month mark to start having some hypotheses and doubling down on things that were working. But I still think we have a number of months to go before. Actually, let me take that back. I would guess that we need another year of posting every single day before I can sit back and be like, I have a founder brand machine. I know exactly what to say and when to say it. Like I think of folks like Adam Robinson, right? Or Dave Gerhardt. Those guys don't have to think about what they're posting anymore. Like they're just following the template that they made for themselves after years of
their
work.
own playbooks. Yeah.
Right. And so I think it's going to take me at least a year to get to a starting place where I could sit back and just let the machine do its thing.
Interesting. I want to rewind a bit, Eli. You said that you needed somebody who could take your thought leadership out of you and then structure it and give it back to you so that you could make it to your own in terms of content. The way I do it with clients is we sit bi-weekly for an hour. I can prepare with questions or prompts, and I design it in a way that helps them give me detailed answers, in-depth answers, right? I'm curious, like, what is your process right now? Do you guys do a similar approach, or is there anything different? Like, how do you maintain like a structure around this?
It's exactly as you described. Same thing. Every other
Okay.
week for an hour.
Interesting. Interesting. Love that. And did you, at what point did you realize that maybe I needed some sort of help from somebody? Like, was it because it was taking a lot of time, or were you not satisfied with your current content? What was it?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above. It was taking a ton of my time, and I asked myself the question, is this the highest and best use of my time? The answer is no. Like, I didn't study writing. I'm not. And the ironic thing is I love writing. I've been writing a book, a historical fiction book for some time in the background just for fun. I'm working on a book related to business as well. Like I love writing. I fucking hate writing for social media. I just think that like the format that gets traction on LinkedIn is so gross and disgusting and like formulaic, and there's just no
Templated stuff, right?
there's no soul in it anymore. And so like, but it still requires a lot of skill to write that way, right? Even if there isn't the soul that I am after, it still takes someone who's very skilled in that style to take something that would otherwise be 5 paragraphs long and make it really punchy and have a good hook and all that. And so it wasn't until I realized that that was not a good use of my time, and there were other people out there who were really talented at that, and that I could just do the thing I'm talented at, which is telling the stories, sharing the insights, that the unlock happened for me.
Interesting. And I want to mention something that you just mentioned. You questioned whether the time that you were putting into this, was it worth it? Could you use it otherwise? For founders have asked me, like, we often ask ourselves, is the time that we spend on LinkedIn justified, or should we be just using that time to run the business itself? For you, what was the justification? What was the justification? Were you seeing some sort of ROI? Was it relationship building, maybe revenue attributed to your business? What was it for you?
When I first started,
Yeah, when you started and you started seeing signals, like, what was it that kept you going?
I think there's something funny about social where some of the business you can attribute directly through first party attribution. They say, where'd you hear about us? When they fill out the lead form, they say LinkedIn, right? And then my question is, was it my LinkedIn or was it an influencer we're working with? And a lot of the time they'll say if it's an influencer. So if it's unattributed LinkedIn, usually I assume that is from my account. So I think some amount of it can be directly attributed to revenue. On the other hand, there's this kind of magical thing that seems to happen where the longer I've been doing this and the better I'm getting at it, the more DMs I'm getting, more random, hey, like, I have this opportunity. I'm curious if you'd like to take a look at it. And just, there's more opportunities or just interesting things that come across my desk organically. And that's hard to put a value on, right? I don't know what these relationships will lead to, but I definitely think that if you're not adding relationships and building that side of your business and your network, then you're going to pay for it down the road. So I'm happy to see those results, even if not all of them are attributable directly to revenue.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I think the last conversation that we had, Eli, I think we had a brief touch on how people usually reach out to you in terms of doing business with you. There are people who don't directly engage with your content on LinkedIn. But when you do ask them, they say, well, we came off the back of LinkedIn, right? We've been consuming your content. Does that happen to you and your business? And how often does that usually happen?
Yeah, I mean, I can give a great example. A couple weeks ago, I had a post that got 5 times the engagement. My account's still pretty small. I'd say my average post does about 30 comments. This post got like 150 comments. And most of the people who were commenting on it were second degree connections. They weren't in my network. And there were names that I had never seen before. So that tells me, okay, they are either following me or they're not, but somehow I'm ending up in their feed, and the content was interesting enough to them that they wanted to, it was a post about, I have this profit model that I use to be able to see into the future and understand where my business is going to be from a profitability perspective, headcount perspective, all of these different metrics that are important at any given time through its growth journey. And I was like, hey, if I turned this into a template, like, would that be interesting for people? Just comment below and let me know if I should do that. And that's where I got that overwhelming response. And so I think it shouldn't be underestimated how many people are, even if they're not regularly commenting on your stuff, they're still listening. I have a lot of friends who are in industry as well, and like every time I get coffee with them, they'll be like, dude, you're like blah blah blah, you're in my feed every day, and like they never comment on my stuff, right?
Never
So
engage.
so I think there's a lot of like stuff that's happening in the background quietly that is hard to attribute for, but is valuable.
That leads to something else that people really are concerned about. They say, well, if you aren't seeing crazy engagement numbers or crazy reactions or impressions, that means the content isn't working. Well, that really isn't the case, because in your case, your example, the fact that second-degree connections were interacting, it means that that content was being pushed enough into the network that people were seeing it, right? And it also shows that they're probably dwelling over your content usually as well.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to get caught up in seeing big numbers from other accounts, like, oh, this post got 1 million impressions or whatever, like crazy big numbers. But I think if most founders, especially I'm speaking to like agency services business founders, because that's what I know. If most of those founders are honest about their business, like for me, I don't need to add more than 20 logos in a year for either of my, like each business. If I add 20 logos, we're having a fucking party, right? Like, because the logos are valuable. So it's, if I have 50 people who are the right people who are engaging with my stuff or at least seeing it every day, and I can convert that audience over the course of time, like I don't need hundreds of thousands. I just need 20 of the right people each year per business.
Yeah.
So we're talking like thousands, not hundreds of thousands.
Interesting. And for people who are thinking, I want to get your, I suppose, sort of like what would your pitch be for this? For people who are thinking of starting in 2025 building their founder brands. You've recently invested in video as well, right? Because I see video content every now and then on your feed. If they want to start creating content on LinkedIn as founders, what would you say to them? Like, what should be their go-to strategy? Should they work a bit on their positioning first and then start creating content off the back of it? Or should they just, as people say, start posting and then see what works and what not, and then start their positioning?
I'm a big fan of just start posting. I think that there's like, you can do all the planning in the world, but until you start actually writing the stuff and actually publishing the stuff and seeing how people react to the stuff and have that feedback loop established, you could plan the most beautiful plan in the world. And then, it's like everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. There's that famous boxer quote. I think it's the same way. It's like, you can have this beautiful go-to-market strategy, and here's our ICP, and here's how our audience, and here's how we're going to speak to them. And then you get a week into it and you're like, wow, I fucking hate this. And then you stop doing it. Like, great. How cool is your plan now? So I think it's better to just get out there and try stuff and follow signal.
Love that. And one last thing before we wrap up, Eli, is in terms of video content, what was the reason you used to, because there's a lot of hype about video content on LinkedIn. Everybody's posting about, oh, I got 1 million impressions on video. Everything's great. But when you actually look at the number of engagement on their posts, it's pretty low, right? It sort of seems like LinkedIn is pushing random stuff to random people, not relevant ICP. So if you're creating video content and you remove thought leadership ads out of the equation, why did you start creating video content, and why do you feel like you need to continue doing it?
So I don't buy the hype on video. I just haven't experienced, like, I've had 1 or 2 videos get a meaningful bump in impressions versus my regular content, but it was super random. Like, the video wasn't anything special. It just seems so random. And so for me, creating videos more about giving people a sense of who I am, right? Like, people buy from people that they like or that they understand or that they feel some sort of connection to. And if I'm just posting texts and photos, I think it's hard for people to get a feel for me. And if none of my competitors are posting videos, but I am, I think it just creates more of a, like, I kind of know this person. So yeah, for me, it's about adding personality and more of it building a connection with the audience than it is about, you know, cracking the algo and, you know, getting
Just because
hundreds
everybody
of
else is
thousands of
doing
views.
it.
Yeah, cool. All
Yeah.
right. Like, I don't know. It's just my thing.
Love that. It's interesting because I had a video with another podcast clip that I posted. It did, I think, 500,000 impressions, but the audience was absolutely random. There were random people looking at my profile, following me. I was like, I never intended to do this because it actually does the opposite of building a brand. It's putting my face in front of irrelevant people who are not my target audience, and it's diluting my brand here on LinkedIn. So it's pretty random. I don't know what they're gonna do with this video thing at the end of the day, LinkedIn, but let's see. But thank you so much, Eli, for the wonderful conversation. I think there are a lot of nuggets here that people could learn from, and appreciate your time. I hope you had a good time as well. And yeah, looking forward to releasing this episode.
I did. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.